Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute, giving people a moment or two to join. Thank you all for being here with us today. All right, today's webinar is chock full of content, and I want to make sure we have as much time as possible for our fantastic panels. So I'm going to go ahead and get things started. Welcome to Transforming Workplaces and Career Journeys Through Human-Centered Design with the National Fund for Workforce Solutions. My name's Tom Strong. I'm the National Fund's Director of the Employer Activation Program, and I'm happy to be your MC today. If you're on this webinar, you're probably familiar with the National Fund, but in case not, I just want to share a little bit about us. We are a Washington, D.C.-based 501c3 nonprofit organization who envision an equitable future where all workers have what they need to thrive, where race does not dictate career success, and where every job is a good job. Our mission is to work towards that vision in advancing racial equity by reshaping the way workforce systems operate. And I would say also workplace systems operate, and we'll get a little bit into that detail in a moment, so that workers, employers, and communities all thrive together. So that's what we do. How do we do it? What do we do about it? Well, the National Fund, we are a network organization. What we do is we unite a dynamic network of regional workforce leaders who we call our network partners. They work with us and other local stakeholders to test new ideas, to learn from success as well as from setbacks, and to share what works with the field. The kind of work we do falls into a few focus areas with them. So first, we try to address systemic barriers to success in the workplace and the workforce to ensure that people have access to opportunities for advancement. Second, we try to transform career navigation and training systems to forge equitable pathways to good jobs. And third, we activate industry leaders to improve job quality in order to create more equitable workplaces. So that's what we do. Now, how do we do it? As you may have figured out by now, like our network partners are central to the way we work. There's 35 of them in total. They're spread across the US, and they all have really deep knowledge of workforce issues in their local regions, and they understand how racial inequity affects the people and communities that they serve. Their local lens and their expertise drives this critical work that we need to do, and we help them in three ways. First, we convene and inspire. We create a support network for our network partners and the many local partners that they work with, to build relationships, to share knowledge, to learn from setbacks, to celebrate wins. Second, we coach and facilitate. We provide coaching and direct technical assistance. We create practical tools, and we share targeted financial resources that are intended to spark practice changes in localities. And third, we amplify and accelerate. When something is working, we learn about it in the network and we share it. We use our national platform to amplify effective practices and help accelerate change. So we're really this kind of national-local model, nationally powered and locally driven. We work in this way because fundamentally all labor markets are local. Job opportunities, employer talent needs, education and training, systems and opportunities, these all are very community-based issues, and local successful workforce solutions also need to be local. Collaboration is key. Changing these systems is a complex feat. It requires a lot of coordination. And so the network partners that we work with and that we try to empower, they are positioned to align resources, knowledge, strategies, and policies. Ultimately, what underlies this all is we believe that collectively we can do more. Our network creates this robust support system for our partners, for their partners. It fuels these long-term relationships and it amplifies successful local strategies that can spread elsewhere. So that's us. Now, what are we actually talking about today? So I'm really excited about today because this gets at today's symposium. It's all about an issue that is near and dear to my heart and my work, which is human-centered design. I'm going to say a little bit more about what that means in the next few minutes. But fundamentally, what we're going to talk about today is how human-centered design is necessary for all of those factors that we are focused on at the National Fund. After that introduction, we're going to have two deep dive interviews with groups who are doing this work. The first one is going to focus on career journeys and healthcare, and it's going to engage partners from the Hartford, Connecticut region. The second one is going to focus on workplace development, again, that term, in the hospitality sector, and it's going to focus on a town called Lisbon, Ohio, outside of Cleveland. We will be happy to take questions all along the way. There, if you look towards the bottom of your Zoom chat, to your Zoom window, you will see a Q&A button where you can log your questions, and we will respond to them as close to real time as we can accommodate. There will be a little bit of time left at the end of the symposium today for dedicated Q&A, but we're going to try to be responsive as we go through this. So with that all said, I just want to take 5 more minutes to talk about what we mean by human-centered design. Human-centered design is an old methodology. It's been around for decades. It's best known, best affiliated with urban and community development movements around the world. But to define it, I'm going to go back to some words that one of our great partners in this space, an organization called Design Impact in Cincinnati, used several years ago, which is that HCD is a way of working that employs empathy, creativity, and rationality to define, explore, and solve problems. What is most fundamental to this approach is that HCD recognizes that the people closest to a problem are probably going to have invaluable and irreplaceable insights when it comes to solving it. And that by engaging people in the front lines as partners, they can help everyone else to define what potential solutions are and test them. The image you see on the right describes HCD as a process, and this comes from another terrific partner of ours called Centrico Human-Centered Design. They describe it as an innovation approach that has these 4 steps. First, discovery of what we even need to know about a problem. Second is defining, clarifying what the problem actually is and what potential solutions might look like. Third is developing. So once we have a sense of what we want to do, trying to iterate and create pilots that could help us solve a problem. And finally is delivering, getting out there and testing a solution, seeing how well it works, and reiterating. We have been on this human-centered design journey at the National Fund for quite some time now. 2 years ago, we worked on a project with the Harvard Institute on Workforce called Career Journeys Redefined. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more depth in a few minutes. But the fundamental idea of Career Journeys Redefined was about interviewing workers to help them help us understand their own career journeys and navigation. We've also worked with a range of our workforce collaboratives on a project in the last couple of years called Human-Centered Workforce Systems that brought human-centered design into the workforce system itself to improve career navigation and training. And then last but not least, we've been working with employers on a range of human-centered design projects over several years now, including the Activating Small and Medium Businesses Initiative, which we did with the Gates Foundation in 2020 to 2022, and Centering Workers in Job Design, which is our current HCD initiative that this session is all about. Now, human-centered design is kind of a wonky term, right? When you say it, like, you're not always confident that people are going to know what you mean. And that may be especially true for our partners in the business world. But I've got some good news about that, which is that businesses are actually very familiar with human-centered design as a concept. They just call it different things. And in particular, these are 4 kinds of human-centered design processes that rely on that same approach as we described earlier. but have somewhat different focal points. So the best known one of these is Lean, also known as the Toyota production system, because Toyota is the company that made it famous. Lean focuses on reducing waste in companies, including material, energy, effort, and even ideas. But the way it works is all through empowered design teams of frontline workers who help identify the problem and figure out solutions to it. It's the same core concept. And Lean started in manufacturing, but it moved pretty quickly into the healthcare sector and other sectors as well. And in healthcare, it's often known too as Plan, Do, Study, Act, which is basically the same thing as Lean, but it's focused on improving outcomes, especially patient outcomes, through small iterative trials. The Institute for Healthcare Improvement did a lot to popularize Plan, Do, Study, Act in healthcare a couple decades ago. There are also a couple of HCD methodologies in business that are not quite as well known, but are the focus of work for us and some of our partners. Those include open book management, which you will hear considerably more about today, and the good job strategy, where we also have a partnership and is based out of MIT. And again, we'll share more about these as we go, but I mostly share this to say that human-centered design is not unknown for business partners. I also mentioned the work we've done in human-centered design and career navigation. And again, really fundamental to this is a project we did a couple years ago called Career Journeys Redefined, Stories of Struggle, Resilience, and Triumph, which was a partnership with the Harvard Institute on Workforce. In this initiative, we worked with 6 of our sites and across numerous sectors to interview frontline workers and prospective workers in a range of industries to help understand how they saw their own career journeys, what factors were helping them, what factors were impeding them, what the successes were that they were most proud of, how their career journeys interacted with their real lives. We turned these interviews into a series of videos, which we will share in the chat, a report called Unlocking Economic Prosperity, and a mapping process that we're now using in our new initiative to help employers and network partners and other key institutions to really understand how do we continue this work with workers in improving the functioning of career navigation. Now, underlining all of this overall is one key concept, which is worker voice. At the National Fund, we've focused on worker voice for a long time. We developed our own definition of it in 2020 and 2021, which really focuses on engaging and centering workers and job seekers as change agents in organizational change to help drive improvements in workforce strategies and programs. We adopted this definition into our job design framework, which is the principal tool we use with employers and sites when addressing job quality issues. We adopted it into our Equip Workers and Success program. Our HCD efforts have all focused on elevating and understanding worker voice. And that's really going to be the key theme for the rest of today's sessions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I see we've got a raised hand from Liz Sarnecki. Liz, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A chat, and we'll try to address it as we go. With that, I'd like to introduce our first panel, which again focuses on the work of our site partners at the Workforce Solutions Collaborative of Metro Hartford. Our panel is Leah Foos, who is the Workforce Solutions Manager at the Workforce Solutions Collaborative of Metro Hartford, which is also located at the United Way of Central and Northeastern Connecticut. Marcus Paca, who's the Director of Workforce and Career Development at Nuvance Health. Our own Melissa Cleater, who is the Senior Manager of Employer Activation at the National Fund. And the interviewer for this section is our colleague, Michelle Wilson, who is the Director of Evaluation and Learning at the National Fund itself. Michelle, with that, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. Super happy to be here and talk to these wonderful folks about some of the work that they've been doing. I appreciate the framing of this conversation, Tom, particularly around human-centered design. And I like to tell a joke. I don't think my husband would think it's a joke about what it means to center folks. Our first anniversary, he gave me a deck of cards with the 52 faces of political evil, and he just thought it was the best gift ever. Alyssa, I know you're laughing at that. Uh, clearly, I was not consulted. Clearly, I was not centered in that design choice, that gift choice, and then that continued for a few years. But anyways, we've learned our lesson. Um, so I like to think about that when you talk about who we center. And so again, stripping away all of the fancy titles that we talk about around human-centered design, as Tom mentioned, at its core, it's about engaging the voices of the people who are most impacted by the changes we collectively seek to advance equity in the workplace. So happy to talk to our guest today. Tom has introduced everybody, but I want to start with Lissa. Lissa, you've been in this work a long time. Hey, Lissa. You've
Hey.
been you've been in this work for a while, and I mean, human-centered design work is centered to what you do. But can you just talk about why this is particularly valuable approach, particularly for workforce?
Yes,
By
thank you,
stating the
Michelle.
obvious, but yeah, going a little deeper. Yes.
Yes, and y'all know, if y'all know me, y'all know I have lots of opinions about this. So let me know. Who's my timekeeper? Keep me on track with it. But I think, for me, when I think about human-centered design, I think about two nuggets really, and one is that is related to this idea that we have been trying to solve workforce challenges for a really long time, and there's a lot of stuff, folks have tried and tried, and it's not quite meeting the mark, right? I think, that definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and not getting any different results. And so I think this gives us an opportunity to try something different to solve some of these long-standing challenges, right? Because we know that there's been this myth that people don't want to work going back to like the 1800s, right? And so it always comes down to it's a problem with the worker as opposed to a problem with the system or a problem with the workplace. Right. And so when it comes to trying to solve those problems, I think in my experience in talking with employers and seeing them try and implement different solutions is that they often think that they really understand the workforce problems and tend to craft solutions for that in a silo. And what often happens as a result is that they may have missed the mark on the actual problem and missed the mark on the actual solution. And so then there's this self-fulfilling idea that these things aren't working, these initiatives aren't helping solve the problem. And it's very well maybe the fact that yeah, because you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and that's why it's not working, right? And then I think the other piece, and so I can give a quick example of that, is one of our collaborative partners, network partners, have shared an example in the past where leadership knew that their folks were struggling with transportation, and their idea was like, you know what, maybe we should figure out how to get them some subsidized parking. Like we can figure out a way to get them better parking. And then it turns out that like over 60% of their workforce use public transportation, right? And so like a parking pass is not going to make any difference there in ensuring
Right.
that they can get to their job on time. Now, maybe talking about can we move a stop a mile closer to where the offices are, or some of those other things that you might be able to work with transit could help some of those problems, and that you get those ideas by engaging the people and finding out like what is your actual struggle? How do we break it down? How do we unpack it?
Right.
And then I think the other nugget that comes true for me is too many employers are hesitant to ask feedback from their employees because they are afraid they're not going to be able to deliver on the requests or the things that are coming up. And ultimately, I think that that ends up leaving a lot of missed opportunity of where you could really get some creativity, some really good ideas, and really good engagement with your workers. Like people want to come to their job and feel like they're having a purpose, something that's
Mhm.
meaningful, and that they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. But so taking that approach of being like, I don't want to ask them. What is true is that if you have zero intention of taking that input and doing anything with it, then you're right. You absolutely should not ask your employees for feedback if you know upfront you're not going to do anything or you're not going to unpack it. But in our experience, when you do ask those folks and you set really clear expectations around what is going to happen with this and are really transparent on what can and cannot be addressed, you have a very fruitful opportunity to solve some very complex problems and then really get that engagement from your workforce.
Right. And I appreciate your point about employers are sometimes afraid to ask because of their ability or inability or their inability to be able to respond or act. And so, I mean, setting the frame for what's doable and what's not doable is really key. And I think that's something that people struggle with in general, because oftentimes, right, when people speak up about something, they may mistake their feedback or not. If you make a suggestion and the suggestion is not acted upon, like, were you even listening, right? Like, so I think there are lots of levels of how you think about providing feedback in ways that's structured, and human-centered design offers that a structured way to engage in feedback, where you can kind of break down all those different pieces. I want to get a couple other voices on the table here. So I'm going to ping to Leah. She's one of our network partners. Leah, can you just hop in on the conversation and talk about your experience with this? You've been involved in a previous project, so you can just hop into the conversation, and then we'll get Marcus's voice into the conversation as well too. Hi, Leah.
Sure, thank you. Hi, Michelle. Yeah, so it was an amazing experience for us. This is our second grant working on human-centered design. So the first one, we were learning human-centered design as we went with a brilliant human-centered design teacher and guide, Eric Serrato. So we were really building the plane as we were flying it. We were meeting with the community, soliciting feedback, gathering insights, and also kind of like learning the framework as we were going. So it was exciting. People really responded to it. One of the really meaningful pieces of feedback that we got was that a career navigator felt like she didn't have a voice, and that she was thinking of changing her work because she just didn't feel like she was having an impact. And then after engaging with us and joining our design team, she totally, flipped that feeling and felt like she had agency and like she had control, and like, all of her lived experience was going into building something really meaningful. In our community, several partners had already been curious about providing a solution like the one we came up with, which was a no wrong door hub approach for opportunity youth, but they'd been unable to put it into practice. So using human-centered design, working with family navigators, career navigators, and youth peer leaders, this was really critical, as well as other stakeholders in the network. We designed this no wrong door navigation hub. And so for opportunity youth, we define that as at-risk or disconnected youth who are between 14 and 29. So there are a couple of really important elements. We had a memorandum of agreement. We had 5 partners, including the city of Hartford, our local United Way, and others.
So let me just pause here. So before we get into
Sure.
the nitty-gritty details, because I think we can go into that, I just want to get I wanted your experience. I want to get Marcus's voice into the conversation, and then we can go a little deeper into the setup of it all. Does that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I know, and Leah is like, she's really excited about this work, and so I've been in conversations with you. She loves this stuff, right? So so she's into it. So hi, Marcus. So we'll come back to that. Hi, Marcus. How are you?
I'm well, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good. I really appreciated meeting with you the other day and hearing your take on the work around what brought you to the work. And so can you just share that with our audience today around what brought you into this work in Nuvance, and where you were in the process, where you were that created the sense of urgency to do this?
Sure, sure. First of all, let me thank the National Fund for Workforce Solutions for inviting me to this panel. This experience has been so relevant and impactful to me in the work that I do at Nuvance Healthcare System. I am the Director of Workforce and Career Development, and it is my job basically to identify innovative pathways into Nuvance Health, utilizing strategic methods of recruitment and workforce development preparedness, so that we can create the next generation of healthcare leaders in Connecticut, in New York, where we operate. So it was very interesting, Michelle, because this work mirrored basically what I was already doing, and I just didn't know it. It's
Right.
been meaningful for me because I've been able to connect a lot of the HCD principles and models to actions and initiatives that we are already instituting at Nuvance Health. I was brought in to this particular opportunity from an organization called Social Impact Partners that is based in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And quite honestly, they just called me up as colleagues in workforce and they said, "We have this great opportunity, Marcus. Would you mind writing us a letter of support?" And I said, "Sure." And then I forgot about it. But it came back around, and I began to do more research into what this could potentially be and how we could integrate this process not only as a tool, but also as a way to give, as we say, those workers more insight and access to the decision-making process and solving the business issues that may be affecting them.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so obviously you all worked with Leah and her team to bring this project to life. I'm really curious about Leah. You were talking about the process of setting the table for this, which is so now I want to go back to that. Now everybody's voice on the table. Can you talk about just this what it looks like to set the table in order to do this kinds of work and can if you can include just briefly like some of the challenges because I think um, when we talk about human-centered design, people can think of it, oh, like this is a lot of work, it's cumbersome, there are lots of pieces to it, and all of that's true. And it's also a process that really responds to what both Marcus has talked about, particularly around I was already doing it, I just didn't have a name for it. And there were some other pieces that I need to bring to it. And the career navigator you mentioned who felt like I've been providing feedback, but nobody's listening to me, but it also created an opportunity or an avenue for folks to like really get in and share, right? Like this process, but how you set the table and who shows up for it, I think is key. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was the same process in both grants. What we learned in the first one, we leveraged in the second. So a couple of things are integral to my process. One of them is very intentional stakeholder engagement. So at the outset, with my partner, and Marcus in this case, we mapped the region, we mapped the ecosystem. Who are the solution partners? Who are the network partners? Who are the community-based organizations? Who are the leaders that we need to talk to early and often to get their feedback, to get their buy-in, and also
Mhm.
to get a little bit of their subject matter expertise because, no matter how much work we've done, no matter how much discovery work, there's always something that we can
Sure.
learn.
Mhm.
So every single person that we speak to, we ask, what questions haven't we asked, but should we?
And so
The-
so what was the time? So just thinking about that, so people have an idea, that process and understanding that it's different from everybody, but just to
yeah.
give people a sense of how much time you spent in this space.
A huge amount of time. So for what the process that we follow is, discover, design, develop, deliver. So those are not all the equidistant, right? They're not all the same
Right,
length of
right.
time. So discovery process is huge. We started from day one and we're still in it right now.
So it's
Um,
iteration.
it really doesn't end. And it even continues as we move into the other phases.
Well, I mean, I think that's key, a key point to it. I mean, so I just really wanted you to lift that up, right? Because I think when people, when you think about this work, um, it is, I mean, the truth of it is time consuming. It's worth it in a way, and it's worth it to do it. But again, it's not like, oh, we've done this, check off, move on to the next. There's an iteration that happens. And so creating space for iteration, if you know that on the front end,
Mhm.
I don't know. You said you learned from the previous one when you did the second one. How did that shift what you learned from the first one? How did setting the table, that discovery process, did it change when you did it the second time around? Or how did it change? Is that a fair
Yeah, that's
question?
a good question. So for example, you don't always know everyone in the ecosystem, and what'll often happen is you'll learn that there's people you want to pull in somewhere along the way. And what you don't want is for stakeholders to hear through the grapevine that something is happening. You want to have solicited their feedback already and kind of gotten their buy-in. So we were very, very intentional about really mapping out who was going to be meaningful to the success of this project down the road.
Mhm.
And we
Mm.
also started at the top and we asked permission of leaders to engage with their teams, and then we met with their teams and asked permission and kind of cascaded that down. And it feels right. It feels good. You get the leaders buy-in. And then, the sort of the buzz starts happening within the organization, but you've done the work already. So you're not on the wrong side of that.
And so Lissa, I'm going to ask you to tap back into this conversation, this part of the conversation as well too. So where's the national fund in this process?
So I think when we think about our tools related to this, I think we think I statements, think of it as a bit of a continuum, right? So I think we started many years ago with our job design framework that gives you kind of a menu of job characteristics that define a good job. Those things change by multiple things, but that's a menu of kind of what's in the sphere of that work. And then we have our job quality outcome maps, which is a way of trying to understand through research which job characteristics tie to the business outcomes. So we always have the business outcomes in mind when we're thinking about interventions. As our evaluator, Michelle, likes to often say, what are we trying to answer? What are we trying to do? And in this case, we pose those same questions to our employer partners. What problems are you trying to solve? Are you looking at retention, turnover intention? Are you looking at burnout, employee engagement? So there's 5 business characteristics that are engaged in those maps. And then you get the HCD guide, which Claudio shared earlier in the chat. And that is really how you take those frameworks and implement them. How do you get started in that work? And then we have the career navigation journeys, which in my estimation is the outcome, right? Like this is an example of how you can get more fruitful, a better understanding of when it comes to career navigation, how you might engage in that process as an employer, as a workforce practitioner, that there are those 5 different drivers and ways that people experience career navigation. And then you can take that and apply, like, how does that align with how I see myself? What kind of services are we providing? Are we meeting the needs of the people?
Yeah. So I love this so much. I love hearing this. I mean, again, I'm a fan of the work of the National Fund, not just because I work there, but because what I hear you saying is like we have a suite of tools that we use with our partners who have used them over time in various ways, as Leah has pointed out, in a couple of different grant scenarios. And then that collective learning really gets like transferred to the work that Marcus is doing in a way that allows him to do the work on the ground. And so I'm curious, Marcus, when you think about this work and this process, what was most surprising to you about this?
Wow, a lot of things. But I think one of the most surprising thing was the amount of time
Mm-hmm.
that it would take to do this the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to be completely dedicated to this work and seeing a human-centered design process to be able to see a human-centered design process be integrated into your organization. And make no mistake about it, it is time consuming, whether it's scheduling meetings, engaging stakeholders, identifying design team members, working through legal to get contracts signed, communication sent out to the proper people. I think that you have to really dedicate yourself to seeing the process through. So that's one of the major surprises about this process, but it's been completely worth it, Melissa. The change that I've been able to see in just a short amount of time working with Leah and her team has been tremendous. It went from just communicating an abstract thought to
Right.
actually putting it in terms of implementation, in terms of value add to our stakeholders. And to see that progression throughout the past 5 or 6 months has been really, really rewarding. So I'm expecting some really, really good outcomes to come out of this. And I hope the folks listening really consider their approach in finding executive sponsors and folks that really believe in it to help you advocate for these types of initiatives internally.
So I'm curious, I appreciate that. And we've spent a lot of time, and we won't do a whole lot more of this. I'm talking about the time component of it because we don't want to scare people away from the work, but I appreciate you bringing in the rewards of it, right? Like there's a lot of time, but the juice is worth the squeeze. I'm curious for you and your team, what part of this What's the so you say like this is good for us, but what shifted in you in terms of how you've done this work, how you show up in the work, and just in how you engage? What as a leader, what's the shift for you?
Yeah, I think Melissa, I'm sorry, Michelle. The
People mix
shift
this
in
up a
me.
lot, so it's okay. It's true.
um, I think the shift in me has come in to really respecting what all employees bring to the table, right? No
Mm,
matter at what level they are at. And one of the things that Leah always instills in me is that this is not prescriptive work, right? We
mm,
are actually listening to people so that we can solve these complex business problems, utilizing the very people that are most affected by that problem. So the shift in me has been being able to realize or reiterate within my work that solutions come at all different levels.
mhm,
And different people bring different aspects and experiences to the table that can all be utilized to help the bottom line of any organization. And the diversity of thought has been shown to really affect that bottom line in a meaningful way. So I think the way that I approach solutions, where I
mhm,
find them, has expanded. I think other
mhm,
people are starting to see that within the organization,
mhm.
and folks are getting more comfortable with giving up power a little bit. I mean, you only have power
Ooh.
if you could give it up.
Ooh, ding, 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 ding,
And
ding. Wait, I just got to stop because that's a major thing. Like this power sharing. There are a couple of questions I wanted to get into. So one, the power sharing piece, that's the real piece. But I'm also wondering, and this is just a placeholder because I forget things a lot. If you could talk about an example of where you've seen some shifts. But let's go back to the power sharing thing because that's a key piece that I think people um um maybe don't think about enough or underestimate how difficult it might be, but also like the rewards of it. But maybe can you say more about that?
Sure. So my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, Marcus, you can accomplish anything if you don't care who gets the credit. And I've and I've had to tell myself that a lot of times because I'm highly competitive. I want to
Yeah.
do well. I want to see all of my projects succeed. But you have to be able to share knowledge. You have to be comfortable with sharing responsibility and sharing the outcomes and results, whether they be good or bad. And one of the ways that I've taken this HCD process to heart is by trusting my team more with projects, with initiatives, giving them more leadway to strategically lead impactful programs within our organization. And what it does, it not only spreads out the responsibility, but it begets a higher sense of engagement and loyalty because folks start to feel like they're really being included in the decision making process. That we have an inclusive environment, and that's one of the goals of our programming, workforce programming at New Vance Health. And one of the reasons why we have our health equity, diversity, and inclusion teams, which are based at each of our hospitals that focus on health equity from an inclusion perspective, where we bring in leaders at the with the leadership of Susan Schoolfield, who
Mhm.
is my champion and executive sponsor in this HCD process, but it creates leaders at the ground level that then utilize other employees at the hospitals to create the programming that will keep people engaged and retained. So for me, so I think it's had an effect on me personally, and
Yeah.
it's starting to have a broader effect organizational wise through initiatives like HEDI.
Okay. Before we get into a specific example, I just want to go back to and recap what you said. I think is really important. You mentioned having a greater appreciation for people's voices. And so what I hear, and you also mentioned um, um, the process for creating a or trusting your team more. And so what I really hear you saying in that space is how you take in voices from multiple perspectives and having a process for your team to be successful allowed you to trust the process in a way than just being out there willy-nilly. So that's what I appreciate about what you're saying. Do you have a specific example around a change process that happened that you can share with us?
Um,
I'll let you think on it and I'll come back to
yeah,
Leah for
yeah.
a second.
Yeah.
So Leah, so the power sharing, I mean, it goes up and down. I mean, it's up and down, left and right, all the way through too. So there's a piece again too, right? Like that. Can you talk about what that looks like from someone who was facilitating this process?
Yeah, so I mean, I love what Marcus just said, and I have some, thoughts about that I wanted to share. So this really is about power redistribution.
Mhm.
We have a rule in our HCD process, which is no hippos. This is straight from Eric Serrato,
Oh yeah.
my guide and guru. Hippo is a highest paid person's opinion, right? It creates groupthink, and it's bad for creative design. So as we're doing this work in our design teams, there are no hippos in the room, and that's intentional. It creates psychological safety, and through that, we create higher commitment to the organization. We fully acknowledge and call out that having a voice is not enough. My voice and the voice of the folks we're speaking to must have an impact.
Mhm.
And we know that this leads to better employer outcomes.
Yeah. And I'm just going to back it up one more step because again, I want to show the through line around how human-centered design, I think we believe that it needs to flow not just from one spot, but throughout, right? Like, so it needs to be on both sides of the coin. So Lissa, now I come back to you and talk about what that looks like for the National Fund to be in a space that's power sharing with one of our national partners around this.
Yes, I am a big fan, and one of the things I like about the National Fund the most is that we try to walk the walk, right? And practice what we preach, and use these same type of processes internally for like our own work, and then also with our network partners. So we, work with 35 organizations across the country, and our new strategic plan is out. And a big part of that is like, how are we doing co-creation with people? How are we thinking about how we share resources differently? How are we getting feedback from the network about where their needs are, particularly when we have a very diverse network, right? They're in different states, they have different local policies, they have different levels of support that they get from their state and local governments. And all of that really impacts kind of the scope and the frame of the work that they're able to do. So being able to do this also allows us to see the real benefit and understand the work that it takes, right? So it is both something that I agree, right? When we're kind of all working fast and trying to get some solutions, but when we're dealing with some complex problems, there is no one solution.
Mhm.
There is no magic one that's going to be like, yes, this is what we're going to do, right? We know that that's not the case. And so being able to truly invest in this and to switch from kind of a reactive place, particularly in workforce development. So many employers are like, oh no, we need surge techs. Oh no, we need this, right? How can this framework help you shift from a reactive space to a proactive space where you're not just looking at one-off problems to solve, but you're taking that and taking workforce development and integrating it to your organizational priorities and strategy. And that's when we have seen in our work with healthcare employers and other employers that that's where the real outcomes happen. That's where the real shifts happen, is when you stop being reactive and are thinking about, what's my workforce going to be in 5 years? What does that mean if I have 10% of our workforce is retiring? What am I going to
Yeah.
do? Right.
Yeah, for
So,
sure,
like,
for
how
sure.
to connect all of those dots.
For sure. And I hear that echoed in what Marcus is saying is happening inside. Marcus, I have a holding question out there, but again, I have tons of questions. So, but so before we go back to that question around if you could give an example, you mentioned in our conversation the other day about one of the value adds is that it takes the onus off of executives to come up with all of the solutions, right? And so, um, can you say more about that?
Yeah. And we're all human beings, right, Michelle? And we all have
Most days I am,
idiosyncrasies.
yes.
Most days, right?
Questionable.
We all have our personalities, our idiosyncrasies, and our prejudices, and they all affect our judgment and our decision making. I think what I've learned from this HCD process so far is that the sharing of responsibility, especially at the executive level, helps to lower the stress levels of those senior level leaders while giving them opportunities to focus on other things. And one of the ways that we are looking to present this is as a tool so that their mid-level supervisors and directors under them have a tool that they can actively utilize to help solve some of those problems before they even get to that executive level. And if we do that and can prove that, then we're bringing value add to the table. So it's been very interesting to go through the process of not only introducing executives at Nuvance to the human-centered design process, but also show that level of intricacy around how is it going to affect them. What do they get out of it? And I think putting it in terms of shared, shared decision making is not a horrible case to make. As a matter of fact, it provides them some cover while again creating a more inclusive environment and creating additional leaders within the organization. But to your earlier question around an example on how we've kind of implemented this kind of expanded scope of engagement within our organization, especially specifically from a workforce development perspective, comes into terms of program planning. Right before I came around, my team would create programming based upon a certain list coming from corporate on roles that we were supposed to focus on. We've learned through trial and error that if we talk to some of our end user stakeholders, right, talk to some of the people that are going to be training our workforce candidates before they come into the organization, but more importantly, the people that are going to be potentially hiring them after our workforce program, it would yield more positive results from a relationship building perspective, a positive first experience for Nuvance Health, as well as a conversion into full-time and part-time roles. So it kind of fits into the entire theme. Whereas we are communicating more broadly, we are getting more stakeholder engagement and feedback, and we're listening to people that have not traditionally been listened to. And instead of trying to solve problems for everybody, we're bringing the people that are going to be affected as the end user stakeholders up front instead of at the end.
Fantastic. So as we wrap up here, I want to just close out by again going back and getting your closeout statements here. So Leah, what for folks who are thinking about this work, who are on the fence about this, what's the call to action to get off the fence? What's the call to action?
Well, it's a great
Besides do
question.
it, right?
I'll tell you what does it for me, and it goes back to the experience of that career navigator when I engaged her in the work. As we explain the work to folks, great majority of them, they start to get really excited. They lean in. They're understanding what we're saying. They see the potential of how they, as an individual, can have an impact on the systems around them, where most of us usually feel powerless. They recognize the power and potential of working in this way. So that's the call to action for me, is that it works.
Yeah. Very good. Lissa, what say you?
Yeah, I think we are at a time where we got to try something different. And we have to be realistic around both being intentional about the problems we are trying to solve and being willing to invest the time and resources that are fully needed to get the outcomes that we really want.
And Marcus, I will give you the final word in this segment.
Well, I thank you for this, and this has been a fantastic panel. My major takeaways are: number one, the role of the champion is key. You need an advocate. You need someone to set the internal tone. You need someone that's going to help you remove barriers. Thank you, Susan Schoolfield. A little shout out. Two, effective upfront communication is key. Is the key to business executives and stakeholders in an environment, in creating an environment where HCD can thrive. And three, this process helps all levels of employees, from executive level folks to middle level managers, all the way to junior level staff. And that's one of the things that I love so much about it and hope to promote in the very near future.
Fantastic. Thank you all for allowing me to have this conversation with you all. I will turn this back over to Strong Tom. And thanks a lot. Thanks.
Thank you.
That was incredible. Michelle, Marcus, Leah, Melissa, thank you for such a great conversation. It was really, really great to listen to, and I think we learned a lot. I want to, in introducing our next panel, I want to call out a couple of themes I was hearing that I would like the audience to keep in mind. One is how this is a, this is an intensive process. It is change management. We don't often think of workforce development as being change management. Marcus made that very clear, like how closely those are connected. And I think that's empowering for those of us in the workforce field to really seize onto. Another theme is how this kind of process, although it's not easy, it helps everyone. It helps frontline workers. It helps mid-level managers. It helps executives all manage their time better and solve problems collectively. And a third piece here is really, while it's resource intensive, there are outcomes that matter in the end for patients, for customers, for clients. It goes beyond the walls of the organization as well and really creates community level wins. So I'm going to introduce our next panel. As I do that, I'd like to invite everyone on this webinar to, shake your shoulders a bit, stretch. I know this has been a lot, but we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. And I think you'll see the connections very shortly. So our next group is going to be focusing on the hospitality industry, and they are Bashara Addison, who is the Director of Workforce Innovation at the Fund for Our Economic Future in Northeast Ohio, Jessica Borza, who is both the co-owner of Pondy's Restaurant, as well as the Managing Director of Workforce Services at the Ohio Manufacturers Association, and Anne Claire Broughton, who is the Principal at Broughton Consulting. Now, on LinkedIn yesterday, I asked a question that I was hoping people might chime in with some answers to, but we're going to provide some answers today that I'm excited about. And that question was, what does a large health system such as Nuvance have in common with a family-owned restaurant such as Pondy's? And I'm hoping that our panelists heard some familiar themes from your own work. I expect you have, and we're going to dig into those right away. So first of all, I want to open things up with Anne Claire. Anne Claire, you're a specialist in this field of open book management. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that means and how it connects to organizational change and other fields that you've been involved with? And I'll note that this is going to be a conversation, but this is a good time for a couple slides. So Josh, go ahead and share a couple slides. I think this will be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom. And this has been fantastic. Really enjoyed the first panel. So just to introduce myself, I am a great game of business open book management coach, and I've been coaching businesses all over the place in all different sectors. And then with this particular project in the hospitality sector. And the other thing that I do is employee ownership. So those two things, creating voice for workers through open book management, and then actually giving people ownership through ESOPs, co-ops, and other structures. It's a dynamite combination. So next slide, please. So open book management, there is a book, The Great Game of Business, which I highly recommend. It is a great read, but it is an operating system. It is not a quick fix. It's not just showing some numbers. It's an operating system that takes some time and change management to implement. But the idea is to engage employees at every level to understand our business. How do we make money? How do we generate cash? How do we serve the customer? And then what are our ideas for how to make things better? And then as the numbers improve, everybody benefits through the bonus plan. And we really want people to be thinking about great ideas for making things better, and then we implement those things. And it is absolutely human-centered design. That is newer nomenclature for me, but we are absolutely engaging the people closest to the problem and coming up with the solutions and the implementation. The thing that we add is we gamify it and we make it fun, and we take away any fear around the numbers and around business. We're just solving problems and we're gamifying it. And there's one more slide I can give a little more information. So the three principles of the game. We organize around the critical number, which is what is most important for us to achieve at this time. A lot of the time it is around profitability because everybody can see themselves in the financial statements from people bringing in revenue in a for-profit business, people that are managing cost of goods sold, and people that are involved in expenses. And then we've got the bottom line. So a lot of times that is the critical number, but it could be anything. It could be something around how we serve the customer, time to market. It could be anything. So we first start with knowing and teaching the rules. We teach everyone our particular business, in this case, the restaurant business. How do we make money? We sell food and beverages. How do we generate cash? What are our key expenses? So we really teach everyone our business, and we teach everyone the financials. We don't expect people to become accountants, but we want them to know how the numbers work in our business. And then we create really smart scoreboards that are based on a condensed profit and loss statement and just have those key line items. Everybody owns a line item and actually learns how to forecast how the month is going to end. And so that's really what gets exciting, because people see all different parts of the business and they see how they fit in and they see the big picture, because too often in our business, we are just in a silo looking at our area. So this gives people a big vision of the whole business. And then we have what we call huddles, using the sports analogy, where every week at the same time at Pondy's, it has been Mondays at 9 a.m. I think it just shifted, but everybody shows up. We forecast the numbers. We have the big picture of what's happening. We tell the stories behind the numbers, because numbers are just stories about people and what we did every day in our business. And then we strategize about what's next and how can we move the needle this week. And we also celebrate fantastic successes and keep that energy positive and recognize the fantastic ideas of people throughout the business. And then we provide a stake in the outcome through the bonus plan, and people know exactly what numbers they need to hit as a group to win that bonus plan. So we gamify it, we make it fun. The other thing we do is mini games, which are short, continuous improvement campaigns that are driven by workers at all levels. Something's bugging them, they want to get better at something. They play a mini game for about 6 to 12 weeks and hopefully solve that problem while making it fun.
So Anne Claire, I think what you just shared already makes this pretty clear, but just to underline it, especially given what you heard in the first panel, how would you describe open book management as a human-centered design system?
I mean, again, it's engaging the people closest to the problem. That's the whole idea, that we don't have hippos. I love that term. I'd never heard that before. And I've had business owners tell me I'm sleeping better at night because I'm not the only one focused on serving the customer and having return on investment. In the case of Pondy's, paying off the loan that enabled them to expand and bring up revenue, but they have a loan payment. So there was a big eye-open at the very beginning of this process, where one of the design team members realized that, the owners are not just going off to Aruba, they're paying off a big loan, and we all are responsible for that loan. So I guess the other piece of human-centered design is that we select a design team from throughout the organization. It's representative of frontline folks, management folks, middle managers, and we work together to design these scoreboards and these games, and then they help to teach everybody throughout the business. So it's very much driven by the employees.
That's wonderful. And I'll say, when Marcus was speaking about kind of taking some of the onus off of the executives, that's immediately what I thought of too. So next,
Yeah.
I'd love to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I literally have had CEOs tell me they're sleeping better.
So next, I'd love to bring in Jessica Borza. Jessica, so you're the co-owner of Pondy's. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, both in the workforce sector and how you came to own Pondy's?
Sure. So thank you again. I've also enjoyed listening to the conversation. I'm happy to be a part of it. So I ended up in workforce development pretty early in my career, cut my teeth in the public workforce system at the local level, and then shifted to work for those in the private sector, first in healthcare and then in manufacturing, in designing and organizing industry sector partnerships. So employers coming together with their partners in education and workforce to solve problems. And that led me to the position in my other professional life now at the Ohio Manufacturers Association, where now I'm organizing manufacturers across the state to work in their local communities through the industry sector partnership model. And so that is how I met Bashara, who you all will be introduced to here in a minute. And that's when worlds collided a bit. So my husband and I have owned Pondi's restaurant since 1998, bought the restaurant and got married in the same year as a testament of our commitment to each other. And at the beginning, we were, a small, locally operated restaurant, 12 employees, now up to 80 employees. And so have, grown and evolved over time, and was really excited to learn about the open book management concept and great game of business. And it has been a true game changer for us. And I can testify to the fact that we are definitely sleeping better at night. So looking forward to having the conversation today.
Thank you, Jessica. And so now I'd like to bring in Bashara, who's our fantastic network partner at the Fund for Economic Future. Bashara, can you tell us about the fund's work in hospitality and how that led to this new line of work with Jessica and potentially further and focusing on open book management?
Of course. And thank you for having me, and everyone, thank you for joining. I work for the Fund for Economic Future, which is a pooled fund that focuses on economic development in Northeast Ohio. And we probably have like six kind of major cities or markets within our footprint. And Jessica happens to be in one of them in her business with Pondi's, and then also in her statewide work. I know that touches our footprint. So that is how I have come to know and love Jessica. Our entry point into this work really started during the pandemic. We kept getting this question of what is going on with the workforce, and we embarked on a body of research called "Where Are the Workers?" And I later I'll put a link in the chat to show you that, so you can see that research. We have a public place facing platform. And that research surfaced a number of things about what workers were saying they felt during the pandemic. So the research was focused on worker perceptions and less on kind of the quantitative data you might see in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And one of the things that came out of that research was that workers were feeling like they weren't being paid enough. That comes as to no surprise to those of us that are in workforce. Workers also said that they were really struggling with feeling engaged in the workplace. And so, amongst several issues that were surfaced in this survey that really looked at worker perceptions of the labor market as things began to open up after the pandemic, we were trying to figure out how do we address these challenges, and like what are some of the solutions we can participate in to help workers, one, increase their income, and also feel more engaged in the workplace. Those were two of several challenges that they surfaced as major barriers. At the same time, as things were opening up in the Cleveland area, we have three major sports teams. And so tourism and hospitality is a major industry in our region. And we also commissioned a report that validated just that if we think about hospitality broadly defined, it's about a third of the economy if you have a broad definition. And so that means if hospitality isn't working, it's going to be difficult to do talent attraction. And talent attraction, not being able to do that well, also is a struggle for the traded sector and other industries where we know we need to attract talent to the region. So we have these complex issues that we're trying to resolve. And I had a chance to get to learn about the open book management model. We also already had a focus on how do we improve the address workforce challenges in hospitality. And one of the biggest challenges we heard from businesses is that they have really narrow profit margins and it's hard to raise wages. So that brings us to this kind of the dichotomy of how do we resolve businesses that want to do right by their workers, but aren't in a position to raise wages, workers who need and are expressing a desire for different working conditions. And one of the things that I noticed about open book management was it felt like it addressed some of those. One, if and I know you'll hear a little bit more from Jessica, there is an opportunity to increase the income of workers through this model, even if you can't necessarily increase wages. And at the end of the day, our goal is to increase income. And so how we get that is, I'm open-minded about that, but I want to get to the outcome for our workers of increasing income. And then it also looks at like how do you actually work with businesses to create some of the things they mentioned on the earlier panel of psychological safety, worker engagement, and human-centered design. And open book management seemed to touch on a number of those features. And so that was when I had a chance to reach out to a number of our partners in the region, Jessica being one, to say, would you have an interest in learning or testing this model? And so our entry point to this work was as a pooled fund. We really care about job quality. That is what our research told us was of value and importance if we want to improve our workforce system. And if we're going to do that, what are the approaches that could actually help businesses improve job quality, but also take into consideration narrow profit margins? And open book management seemed like an approach that could address
Thanks, Bashara. So I'm going to jump in here with just a little bit of context of how this all got started for us as well, which is that we were running an initiative called Redesign Jobs Resilient Workers after the pandemic. Bashar's organization was one of our 4 network partners involved in that initiative. And there was an opportunity towards the end to start trying out some new things. That initiative, as well as centering workers, were sponsored by the Prudential Foundation. And Prudential itself has a lot of interest in raising frontline worker wages and wealth building. And so we looked at the possibility of open book management at that time and had communicated out that we were going to try a pilot. And I believe that, Bashar, that's how you came to be in contact with Jessica about this. Is this correct? So we had brought in a number of companies to apply for this opportunity as a first trial, and Anne Claire was the consultant we brought in to lead the initiative. We ended up choosing 2 companies, and Pondi's was one of them. And I will say, like from the National Fund's perspective, the biggest thing we were looking for in that application process was leadership commitment and already kind of seeing an intention of wanting to create better jobs in the sector. And we saw both of those at Pondi's, which is how we came to work with you. So I am curious, Jessica, in terms of like, first of all, like how that process was for you. And second, like how did the work with Anne Claire get started?
Yeah, so yeah, it was kind of serendipitous that that information came to us. And I think that as you picked up, it sounds like through our application process or some of our earlier conversations, I think we soon, we sat through a couple of information sessions and got to engage and answer questions. And I had my husband and our operating partner had additional questions. And so, I think our intention has always been that we want to be as generous as possible with our employees, but there are some financial realities and limitations, particularly in the restaurant businesses, Bashara said, with very tight margins. And so we had inclinations that we knew what the problems were. We were always really good at increasing our revenue. Year over year, we've increased our revenue, increased sales, but containing our costs was our Achilles heel. And we knew what the problems were. We knew, where waste may be hidden or, where our expenses may be out of line, but we didn't have all the solutions. So I think that's a theme that we heard earlier too, that we knew that we didn't have, we had ideas about it, but not all of the solutions. And we can't be at the restaurant 6 days a week, both shifts, and, we can't control those things ourselves. So we, I think have always had a decent level of engagement with our employees. We have employees that have been with us for the 27 years or close to it. But we didn't necessarily have the level of engagement in implementing those solutions. And, with a healthy dose of thinking maybe we might be going to Aruba every year or whatever. It was difficult to get that level of engagement. And so when we heard more about open book management and the great game of business, it really felt like it gave us the systems and the tools to really do the things that we knew we had to do, but to do them systematically and make them stick. And so that's what we have appreciated very much about the concept and the approach. And Anne Claire, as our coach, was our coach and our teacher, and helped us to develop the discipline, first kind of building our muscle to, implement those systems and create mini games and, do all of the things that engage the employees in identifying the problems and creating the solutions. But then over time, now we have, different exercises that we need to do for endurance and, to continue in the sort of the marathon that we're in. But Anne Claire taught us along the way, engaged directly with the staff, was very closely involved with our design team, which was a closer group of representative employees that helped us to design the work that we would do together and prioritize, some of the areas that we were going to tackle.
That's great. And again, I'm hearing some of the terms that came up before in terms of design teams. Like that seems to be a common element between these two systems. Anne Claire, I mean, really for both you and Jessica, but can you share a little bit more detail about how you work together? Like, what was the process from start to finish for this initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. So once Pondi's had decided to go forward, we had conversations about how it would look, worked with them to choose the design team, which employees would be there. We did some initial financial analysis so that I would have a picture of what the business was dealing with. And then we, being a human-centered system, we surveyed the entire workforce to get a sense of what everybody thought the business was doing well and where there were opportunities to do better. So we had everybody's voice in the room, even when we were working just with the design team. And so I came on site for 2 days for the initial on-site. And one of the first things I did was to address the whole team. I think I may have addressed the whole team on a webinar even before I came on site. But when I came on site, introduced myself, introduced the process, and we went outside and played a game with the entire workforce, the great game of bouncing balls. And so we got everybody involved from the beginning. And then I worked with the design team intensively for several days to go through the 10 steps of implementation and start to build out their system. So their scoreboard, their bonus plan, their first mini games. And again, just got a chance to go through the financial statement with just the design team, and right away light bulbs were going off. Then I worked with the team for about 4 months, once a week on Zoom, and we built out the structures, taught the design team how to forecast the numbers and tell the stories behind the numbers. We actually worked together to build the budget for the year because we needed that benchmark every month to know exactly what we were aiming for. So I think that was a useful process. And then I believe in playing a mini game from the beginning with the whole company. So the very first mini game that we came up with in that initial onsite was around cleaning, building good habits around cleaning the facility and keeping it in really great shape so that the next health inspection would be a breeze. And it was. So we were successful there. And that's, again, a way to get everybody involved. And then after that 4 months, I came back on site for a couple of days and we did our all team launch. Before that, we did financial literacy and we played Family Feud to learn about the numbers at Pondi's. And Jessica did a fantastic job facilitating that. And I was there on Zoom to help out. So yeah, we wanted everybody to understand some basics of the financials. Then we did the all team launch. Everybody got to see a huddle. They got to understand the numbers. We celebrated our mini game wins, which were many because most of my teams play about 1 mini game in that 4-month period. I believe Pondi's played 3 and they went on to play several more. So we did our all team launch. Then they huddle every single week And I worked with them to develop some key metrics for each department.
So you brought up mini games a couple times, and I want to, Josh, if you want to go ahead and share some slides again. I was wondering if you could just share a little bit more about what a mini game is and how it worked at Ponde's.
Yeah, so it is a short continuous improvement campaign that will enable us to change a habit or reinforce some business training. And it helps us to work together as a team and get in the habit of winning and having fun while we're solving business problems. And we really want for the employees to come up with the targets and to say, look, we're wasting a lot of potatoes. Let's play a mini game around potatoes, which Ponde's did. It was called Mr. Potato Head. And they figured out how to not waste so many potatoes. But you can see here on the right, the first mini game was around cleaning. And so people really threw themselves into it and got in great habits. They had checklists by department, so everybody knew what they needed to clean after their shift. And they got points for doing the basics, and then they got extra points for doing the deep cleaning, like on top of the coolers. And so they won that game handily. And I believe the theme was so fresh, so clean. We even had a theme song. So that was a fantastic mini game. Then we played these two simultaneous ones. So front of house, the servers and the bartenders played upselling bingo because that's a way they could increase revenue. That's where they interface with the profit and loss statement is around revenue. So they had these little bingo cards at the beginning of the shift, and they would, if somebody ordered a salad, you could offer them shrimp to go on the salad or offer them desserts, things like that. And so that was what the front of house played. Meanwhile, back of house was playing a game that really affected cost of goods sold around using materials very well. So Bill is showing that every single drop was used out of that can. We didn't throw away, just a little ranch dressing. We used every last bit of ranch dressing, and we portioned our hamburgers correctly. We figured out that was going to save something like $7,000 a year, just portioning correctly. So back of house was doing that game around using materials wisely. And with these mini games, you have sort of short, medium, and long-term goals and short, medium, and long-term prizes. So we had, something small and fun when we hit our first goal, something a little better. And then our big prize tended to be things like Corey cooking breakfast for everybody, or there was one where Matt was supposed to wear a Browns jersey, but I think he didn't have to because we didn't win that one.
So there's all these kind of, fundamental business activities that you're engaging people in, and like each one on their own, like they're fun and they're inclusive. But they're also kind of like they're simple improvements, right? How does this add up to outcomes for the organization overall? I mean, what kind of outcomes did you, Jessica, see from this process?
I think you hit on what I think is the beauty of the great game of business is that it's not one magic bullet. It's a series of cost savings measures or revenue boosters that the employees suggested that all add up over time, and they learned through the financial literacy that Ann Claire facilitated and we now replicate with new employees. They learned how increasing revenue is great, but it's even better to decrease your expenses or to decrease your cost of goods sold and how that affects the bottom line. And so they really realized that. And so as you can see here, just year over year. So in 2023, we actually were, not making money. And that had been the case for several years. We were in an old building. We, weren't containing our costs. We needed to make a change. And so with this, the implementation of Great Game of Business, not only were we able to continue to increase our top line growth, which you can see there with an additional 700,000 in total income, but the big impact was at the bottom line where we were able to net 280,000. So of that, we were actually able to pay out almost $78,000 in bonuses for our first year, which was our highest level. There are different levels that we set based on our goals goals in our PBT, and we reached the level 5, the highest actual bonus payout, which was phenomenal. And the rest of that profit actually ended up going to, pay for the loans that paid for the expansion in the new building and the new concept. So we were able to achieve both the expansion and the things we needed to do to have the business really survive and thrive, while also being able to reward the employees who made such great contributions.
Yeah, and this is really impressive. And it also is a good example of how the Great Game of Business bonus works. Everybody knows exactly what they stand to gain if we can hit metrics. And we're looking every single week and educating people through the scoreboard about, how it works and how they can contribute. So the team knew at Pondi's that they needed to hit at least 3.9 million in revenues, and they completely exceeded that. And then they knew they had to make at least 6% profit, which would be 56,000. Well, as you see, they completely exceeded that as well. And the wonderful thing that Jessica did when presenting the bonus to everybody in January was to list out 2 slides worth of idea after idea that the team had generated throughout the year in order to hit these results. So I think not only did they do a good job of implementing, but they did a good job of communicating and connecting the dots about how the whole team contributed to these fantastic results. And one last thing I'll say is that typically these bonuses end up paying people an additional 10 to 20% of payroll. So they make 10 to 20% more than they would otherwise. And that's pretty rare, I think, in hospitality.
That's amazing. And it's really interesting to compare this kind of approach to more of a traditional workforce development approach that might have a similar outcome, but generally for kind of a smaller amount of people, because you're generally trying to move people up a career ladder and often into an entirely new industry. Bishara, I'm curious from your perspective as a local funder and intermediary, like how did this all look to you, and how does it impact the way you're thinking about the Fund for our Economic future plans when it comes to job quality?
Yeah, so one, I mean, the outcomes that Jessica had with Anne's support were like amazing. But it also showed that if you have that top leader buy-in and a commitment to really building kind of that design team, that you really can see profits within a year or two. So, when we were discussing both year one coaching, um, they were predicted to be in the red and ended up being in the black. The Fund for Economic Future helped to subsidize their participation with year two coaching, and you can see the results that were on this screen. And when I think about what can we do, particularly since Black and Brown workers, which one of the priorities of the fund is really thinking about how no one's economic mobility is determined by race or place. And we know that we have Black and Brown workers that are disproportionately concentrated in hospitality. How do we increase income for those individuals when you have an industry that has low profit margins? And we have a market where we have a lot of family owned businesses and fewer chains. And this seems to be an approach. The upfront cost is a bit expensive, but the ROI over between 2 to 3 years, which any of us doing programs and thinking about evaluation, seeing outcomes in between a year to 3 years is actually a really short period of time. And so, as someone who is thinking about where can we leverage our unrestricted funds and our investments to be able to support this approach, now that I know this can work with really strong leadership and buy-in, how do we think about finding additional businesses both in a footprint where there's a concentration of hospitality, but also with other businesses? Because in open book management isn't just for hospitality. Actually, a lot of the original case studies for open book management were focused in manufacturing. I'll
Right.
also add that Anne, being a coach for Jessica, has also done some coaching for a worker-owned cooperative in the greater Cleveland area, our Evergreen cooperatives. And so there are multiple instances where this particular kind of coaching is yielding stronger ownership from workers, where they feel more included and more of a part of the business. There's also a clarity on how everyone's role is important. So there's a shift in power dynamics when everyone understands that their role matters for the success of everyone's bonus pool. And at the same time, this can increase profits for businesses that really struggle to do so. And so even though there's a upfront cost, uh, I am thinking, or at least my vision is, how do we create more ands? Because and can only be in so many places at once. And so that's building up local expertise to think about this work. And then the second is, how do we think about using government funding to support some of this work, particularly since the coaching that's being provided to the workers is more than just like financial literacy that you might see in health and human services or at a community-based organization. This is a different kind of financial literacy that should be portable when someone is thinking about either a promotion within a firm or thinking about transitioning into another place. These are really important skills that someone is developing. And I think even there are some examples within Pondi's where individuals who were kind of leading the way in the design team for open book management did see some promotion and growth because of the skills that they gained. And so this is of particular interest to any funder that is interested in job quality.
Thank you so much, Bashara, and thank you, Jessica and Anne-Claire, and all of our other panelists today. We are approaching time. There are a couple questions that have come in through the chat that I do want to highlight and try to do a little lightning round. One is that, and I think Anne-Claire, you may be best to answer this. How do you disclose, as part of this transparent process, profits to the owners in a way that is okay for both owners and employees?
Yeah, so we only report salaries in aggregate, and yeah, we don't disclose things that would be disruptive or conflictual.
And another is, how about doing this with nonprofits, where there may not be the ability to offer bonuses?
Yeah, I do have colleagues that have, so by the way, Bashar, there is a whole list of coaches who are coaching around the country. So it's not just me, but we definitely want to train more people as well. And there are a number of nonprofits that implement Great Game of Business, Open Book, including Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Ozarks. They were leaders. So on their scoreboard, they have not only their financials, but also the impacts that they're having on matching what they call bigs with littles. So, and I think some nonprofits have managed to set aside some general operating funds to actually offer some bonuses when they manage their funds really well. So it is not completely out of the question to offer modest bonuses at nonprofits.
And then one last question, I guess for Jessica. Did this also impact retention?
Most definitely. I would say both recruitment and retention. We have had people that have heard about what we're doing come to us, and then we have definitely had people who have worked in the industry all of their careers and don't intend on leaving Pondi's anytime soon because they see the difference. And so yeah, we have most definitely seen an increase in retention.
Wonderful. Again, thank you all so much. We are at time. This has been a fantastic webinar all around. We really appreciate the wisdom of the participants, the audience. If this is a topic, this human-centered design in the workplace topic, that those of you in the audience want to learn more about, please feel free to reach out to me or my team. I'm going to put out my email in the chat. I'm always happy to talk about this set of issues and questions. With that, thank you everyone so much, and hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.